Welcome to this explainer. If you've ever stood next to a massive MRI machine and just wondered about the precise, invisible mechanics happening right beneath the surface, well, you are definitely in the right place. Today, we're unpacking the foundational mechanics of MRI technology. Specifically, we're going to look at the concept of the pulse sequence and the physical mechanics of something called saturation recovery. Let's just dive right in. When you're actually lying inside that massive, noisy tube, it honestly feels pretty chaotic. But what's really happening is a total masterclass in precision. An MRI machine doesn't just passively snap a picture like a camera on your phone, it actively orchestrates these invisible magnetic fields and radio waves in a highly controlled dance. To see inside the human body, the machine literally communicates with the protons in your tissues using incredibly precise timing. And that specific language of timing, we call that a pulse sequence.
So a pulse sequence is exactly what it sounds like. It's a sequence of radio frequency, or RF pulses, applied repeatedly during a magnetic resonance study. Woven directly into this process are two absolutely critical time parameters, TR, which stands for repetition time, and TE, or echo time. Now, these aren't just arbitrary pauses, right? They are the exact dials we turn to control what kind of information we actually pull out of the body's tissues. It's this continuous rhythmic cycle of pulsing and pausing over time that builds the raw data we need to create a medical image.
Okay, so now that we have that baseline established, we can zoom in on one really fundamental sequence, the saturation recovery pulse sequence. By breaking this one down, we get this brilliant, unobstructed view of how manipulating TR, that repetition time we just talked about, directly impacts the magnetic state of protons in the human body.
If you look at the timeline of this sequence, you'll notice the semicircles at the top representing our 90-degree RF pulses. And look at that massive physical gap between one pulse and the next. That long gap is our TR, the repetition time, which is intentionally kept very, very long in this scenario. Right below that, check out the rising curve. That shows the longitudinal magnetization recovering over time. Because the space between those pulses is so incredibly wide, that curve literally has all the time it needs to reach all the way back up to its absolute maximum plateau before the next pulse even hits.
This whole process happens in three distinct, very logical steps. Step 1. The machine applies a 90-degree RF pulse. This takes the longitudinal magnetization, which normally points straight up along the z-axis, and knocks it completely flat into the transverse plane. We call this specific state being saturated. Step 2. We just wait. This long TR allows the protons to realign with the main magnetic field, letting that longitudinal magnetization fully 100% recover. And finally, Step 3. Right after the next pulse hits, we immediately measure the resulting signal. That's the free induction decay, or FID. The TE, the echo time here, is essentially zero. We just listen right away.
The absolute crucial takeaway here is that waiting patiently is what allows the longitudinal magnetization to recover completely. Because we do this, the FID gives us the maximum possible signal every single time. By allowing the system to fully reset from the previous pulse's saturation, we practically guarantee a robust, powerful signal. There's no residual saturation carrying over from the last go-round. Each measurement is taken from a fresh, fully restored baseline.
So, that brings us to a really fascinating question about application. We've set the machine to these very specific parameters, right? We've intentionally chosen a really long repetition time, allowing for that full recovery. And we've chosen a minimal echo time, meaning we measure the signal instantly, without any delay at all. When we orchestrate the physics in this exact manner, what is the ultimate result on the doctor's computer screen? Like, what specific kind of tissue contrast are we actually highlighting with these timings?
The answer is a proton density weighted image. Here's why. By using a long TR, we essentially eliminate any contrast differences that rely on T1 recovery times, simply because we've let everything fully recover anyway. And by using a minimal TE, we eliminate contrast differences based on T2 decay times, because we haven't even given the signal time to decay. So the only major variable left dictating the strength of the signal is simply how many protons are physically present in that specific tissue. The denser the protons, the brighter the signal. It is a brilliantly elegant way to isolate just one physical property of the human body.
But here is where our story takes a pretty surprising turn. We have this incredibly elegant, logically sound pulse sequence that produces a clear, maximum signal proton density weighted image. It sounds perfect. Yet, if you walk into a modern hospital today and observe an MRI scan, you will practically never see the true saturation recovery sequence being used in clinical practice. It is, for all intents and purposes, completely obsolete. So we kind of have to ask ourselves, why? If it works so perfectly in theory, what actually breaks down in reality?
Well, the downfall of this sequence lies in the harsh realities of hardware and real-world physics. First off, the sequence demands a minimal TE, meaning we have to measure the FID signal instantly after the 90-degree pulse. But electronically, that is incredibly difficult. The machine's hardware actually needs a tiny fraction of a millisecond to switch from transmit mode over to receive mode, which creates this mandatory delay period. You simply can't measure it instantly. Second, and honestly perhaps more importantly, the FID signal is highly susceptible to external magnetic inhomogeneities. Basically, the magnetic field of an MRI scanner is never perfectly uniform, and this lack of uniformity causes the FID signal to dephase and just disappear way too quickly, totally ruining the image quality. The real world is, well, it's just a bit too messy for this sequence.
Which brings up a fair point. Why do we just spend time learning it? Well, this illustrates exactly why we study it. Even though it's obsolete clinically, these simple sequences are the absolute perfect springboards from which to learn about other, way more complex pulse sequences. You really cannot grasp advanced modern techniques without first mastering how TR and TE manipulate a signal in a vacuum. The saturation recovery sequence isolates these variables perfectly, making it hands down the ultimate educational tool for mastering MRI physics. So, I'm going to leave you with this. If saturation recovery was just the springboard, and its fatal flaws were electronic delays and magnetic field inconsistencies, what complex sequences had to be invented to eliminate those exact problems? The foundation is officially set, and the evolution of this incredible technology is waiting to be explored. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.